She stood by the window, her eyes tracing the dusty road that cut through the endless stretch of arid land. The horizon blurred beneath a sun-baked sky, but still she waited. Years had passed since the day her world was shattered, since the gang of outlaws tore through the quiet ranch and stole from her everything she held dear. The wind whispered through the cracked wooden frame, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and the distant howl of coyotes. Yet no voice answered hers. No footsteps broke the stillness. Martha's hands rested lightly on the weathered sill, worn smooth by time and tears. Her face, etched with lines carved from sorrow and stubborn endurance, held a quiet determination that defied the years of loneliness. She had become a fixture in the small town nearby, known as the widow who waited. Some whispered she was foolish, clinging to hope when the world had already moved on. But Martha had never allowed despair to claim her. Every morning she rose, pulled on her faded shawl, and took her place by the window, watching the road as if her gaze alone might bring back the son she had lost. Her son Jacob had been just a boy then, strong, bright, and eager. She remembered the day before the raid, his laughter echoing as he ran across the dry fields, a rifle slung over his shoulder like a man already grown. His father had taught him well, the old cowboy's lessons etched into every careful movement. They had dreamt together of a future, a life rooted in the rugged land they called home. But those dreams were torn apart with brutal finality when the gang rode in under the setting sun, guns blazing and cruelty in their eyes. The memory haunted her still. The sudden thunder of hooves, the flash of steel, and the cries of men caught off guard. Her husband had fallen fighting, his body a shield for their boy. But Jacob was taken, dragged away into the fading light by strangers who saw him only as a prize, a tool for their dark purposes. Since then, no word had come. No sign that he lived, or that he survived. Just silence, thick as the dust that settled over their land. Martha refused to surrender to the cold grip of despair. She filled her days with chores, tending the ranch with the same hands that had rocked Jacob to sleep and stitched the wounds of his childhood scrapes. She kept the hearth warm and the bed made, ready for a son who might walk through that door one day. People in town said it was madness, but to her it was faith, an unyielding bond that no passage of time could sever. The townsfolk spoke in hushed tones of the outlaw gang, a shadow that never fully left the region. Whispers drifted through the saloons and behind closed doors that the gang had been seen again, prowling near the canyons where the wind sang its mournful song. Fear gripped the hearts of many, but Martha met the news with a steely calm. She had no illusions about what Jacob's return might mean. The world beyond her window was harsh and unforgiving, but it was hers, and she was ready. At night, when the stars pricked the velvet sky, she would sit alone on the porch, fingers tracing the worn leather of a faded photograph. Jacob's face frozen in time, eyes bright with promise. Her heart beat with the quiet hope that somewhere, somehow, her boy was out there, fighting to come home. She listened to the wind stories, imagining the tales he might tell, the man he had become. But waiting was a cruel companion. The years had a way of wearing down even the strongest spirits. Her shoulders ached with the weight of solitude, and shadows grew longer with every passing season. Yet each dawn found her by the window, searching the horizon for a sign, a glimpse of a figure riding toward her through the dust and heat. Neighbors often stopped by, offering kind words or wary glances. Some brought food. Others tried to distract her with town gossip or church prayers. But Martha's gaze never wavered from the road. She had learned to live in the silence, to listen for the faintest echo of a voice she knew better than her own. The waiting was not passive. It was a silent battle fought with patience and resolve. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the jagged cliffs, a stranger passed through town. His eyes held the weariness of long roads and hard battles, but also a flicker of something familiar, something that stirred the restless hope buried deep in Martha's heart. Though she did not speak to him that night, a small ember of anticipation ignited within her. Could it be that after all this time, the past was riding back to her door? The wind shifted, carrying with it the promise of change. Martha turned from the window reluctantly, but the memory of that shadowed figure lingered like a whispered secret. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, only that the waiting had to end someday. Somewhere beyond the endless desert, a story was unfolding, one that would test the limits of love, courage, and justice. And so, beneath the vast expanse of the frontier sky, the widow waited still, not for comfort, not for peace, but for the moment when the voice she had dreamed of for years would finally call her name. The sun disappeared completely, leaving the world cloaked in twilight. The window reflected her weary face, strong, hopeful, and ready for whatever fate might ride in on the coming dawn. A heavy fog had settled over the canyon before dawn, wrapping the ranch in a thick, gray blanket that swallowed the familiar shapes of the land. The usual sharp outlines of twisted mesquite and weathered fences blurred into ghostly forms, and the world felt suspended between night and morning. Martha stood once more by the window, the glass cold against her fingertips, watching through the haze as the road vanished into nothingness. The silence was broken only by the faint rustle of wind stirring the dry leaves, but beneath that quiet, her heart thrummed with a restless hope she barely dared to breathe. Then a sound of voice cut through the mist. It was soft at first, almost a whisper, but unmistakable. "Mother." The single word carried across the fog, like a fragile thread connecting two distant souls. Martha's breath caught in her throat. It was Jacob's voice. The same tone, the same gentle cadence she had memorized from his boyhood calls. Now roughened by years, she could not imagine. Her eyes widened as she scanned the misty horizon, searching for the figure who might break through the silence of so many lost years. Out of the gray murk came a slow, deliberate shape, a man on horseback, his silhouette heavy and worn. His clothes hung loose on a frame lean but strong, and his face, when it finally emerged from the fog, was marked by time and hardship. Scars lined his jaw. A stubble darkened his cheeks. His eyes held the quiet fire of a soul tempered by trials. The man paused at the edge of the ranch, the horse's hooves barely audible on the soft earth. He called again, more firmly this time. "Mother, it's me. Jacob." Martha's heart pounded fiercely as she flung open the door and stepped into the cold morning air. The mist curled around her like a shroud, but the warmth flooding her chest was undeniable. She struggled to steady her voice, trembling with disbelief. "Jacob, is it really you?" She stepped forward, reaching out with hands that once cradled a child, now steady and resolute. The man dismounted slowly, meeting her gaze with a flicker of recognition and something deeper, relief, perhaps, or a sorrow too heavy to voice. "I've come home," he said simply, his voice rough but steady. "I'm here." For a long moment neither moved. The years of waiting, the endless nights haunted by memories of that violent raid, all converged in this single, fragile reunion. But Martha sensed something else beneath the relief, a quiet wariness in his eyes. He was not the boy who had vanished. Something inside him had changed. "Where have you been, Jacob?" she asked, her voice low, trembling with a mixture of hope and fear. "Why did you not come back sooner?" Jacob's gaze fell to the ground, shadowed by the brim of his hat. "It's a long story, Ma. Things I can't explain just yet." His hands clenched the reins tightly, knuckles white beneath weather-beaten skin. "But I've been running from ghosts, fighting for a life that wasn't mine to begin with." The fog thickened, as if shielding their fragile moment from the world beyond. Martha wanted to ask everything, to unravel the mystery of those lost years, but the man before her seemed both weary and wary, carrying burdens she could not yet see. Instead, she nodded slowly, a fragile trust beginning to bridge the chasm of silence. Behind them, the ranch waited, battered but standing, the last refuge of a family torn apart, but not defeated. Jacob looked toward the distant hills, where rumors of the outlaw gang's return had stirred uneasy whispers. He spoke with a hardness that startled Martha. "They're coming back, Ma. The same ones who took me. They want something I took from them long ago. I didn't run because I was scared. I ran to prepare." Her heart tightened at the mention of the gang. The specter of those ruthless men had haunted her for years, their shadow stretching far beyond the desolation of the desert. "Then we must be ready," Martha said, her voice steady, sharpened by the years of waiting and survival. "This land is ours, and they will not take it again." Jacob's eyes met hers with a flicker of something new. Respect, maybe even pride. "I'm not the boy you remember, Ma, but I'm coming back to finish what was started." The sun began to rise behind the canyon walls, burning away the fog in a slow, deliberate glow. The world grew clearer, but the uncertainty remained, a tense silence hanging between mother and son, woven with hope and shadowed by danger. They stood together on the porch, the past and future colliding in the cool morning air. Martha looked at him closely, searching for the boy she had lost and the man he had become. She knew this reunion was only the beginning, not the end. A storm was coming, one that would test their bond and their courage. But for the first time in years, she no longer waited alone. The road stretched before them, empty and quiet, but soon it would echo with the thunder of hooves and the clatter of gunfire. The fog was lifting, but the real fight was just beginning. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the last wisps of fog that clung stubbornly to the land. The ranch lay quiet under the widening light, but beneath its calm surface, a tension thickened, like the heavy air before a desert storm. Martha stood beside Jacob, her gaze sharp and steady, scanning the distant ridges where the outlaw gang was said to be gathering once more. The son she had waited for all these years had returned, but the boy was gone. Before her stood a man forged by hardship and fire, carrying secrets in his eyes and a resolve that ran deep. Jacob's hands rested lightly on the worn rifle that had once belonged to his father, the weapon feeling familiar in his grip despite years of absence. "They think I'm the scared boy they took," he said quietly, voice low but edged with iron. "But I've learned to survive in ways they never imagined." His eyes flashed with something fierce, knowledge born from nights spent hiding in shadows, from battles fought far beyond these peaceful hills. Martha's heart swelled with pride, but also with a cautious wariness. She had raised him with love and hope, but the man before her was a stranger carved from pain and survival. "What did you learn out there, Jacob?" she asked gently. "What makes you ready to face them now?" Jacob's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the sun cast long shadows across the rugged canyons. "I learned to fight smarter, not just harder," he replied. "I found allies where I least expected, and learned to read the land like a second skin. The outlaws underestimated me once. They won't make that mistake again." He paused, then added, "There's more than just guns this time. It's about outwitting them, turning their own cruelty against them." The words hung heavy between them, carrying the weight of untold battles and plans laid in secret. Martha nodded slowly, the resolve in her own soul rekindled by his fierce conviction. "Then we prepare," she said simply. "This ranch is our home. We'll defend it with everything we have." The days that followed were a whirlwind of quiet activity. Martha and Jacob moved like shadows through the fields, repairing fences, setting traps, and gathering what little the land could offer. Neighbors watched with a mixture of awe and disbelief. This was not the helpless widow they had known, nor the lost boy, but a team forged in hardship and hardened by waiting. Rumors of the gang's approach grew louder, their menace looming like a dark cloud on the horizon. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mesas, a figure emerged from the dust, a stranger riding hard, his presence commanding attention. He introduced himself as Silas, a scout who had tracked the outlaws across the territory. His weathered face was framed by a wide-brimmed hat, and his eyes held a sharp intelligence that seemed to weigh every word before it was spoken. "I've been following their trail for months," Silas said, his voice gravelly but certain. "They're ruthless and desperate, but they don't know you've got a plan, and that you're not alone." He looked at Jacob with a grudging respect. "You've got the look of a man who's been to hell and back, and came back ready to fight." Jacob nodded, acknowledging the stranger's words without surprise. "I learned from the best," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "And now it's time to finish what started years ago." Martha watched the exchange silently, a growing sense of hope mingling with the tension. The coming days would demand every ounce of courage and cunning they possessed, but she saw in her son's eyes the spark of something legendary, a hero not born from tales, but forged in the harsh crucible of the frontier. The night before the outlaws were expected to strike, the ranch fell into a tense silence. Shadows lengthened beneath the moonlight, and the air held a fragile stillness. Martha sat by the fire, her thoughts a whirlwind of memories and fears. She clutched a small locket, her husband's, and whispered a prayer for strength, for Jacob, and for the battle to come. Then came the sound, the faint clatter of hooves, the murmur of voices, the unmistakable stir of danger closing in. Jacob rose, his figure calm and steady in the flickering light. "It's time," he said, voice low but resolute. Together, mother and son moved into the night, ready to meet the storm that had haunted their lives. Martha's heart beat with a fierce rhythm, fueled by years of waiting and now by the fire of justice. The ranch was no longer just a place of loss. It was the stage for a reckoning. As the outlaws approached under the cover of darkness, they found not a broken family, but a force tempered by pain and sharpened by love. The widow who waited and the son who returned stood side by side, ready to face the shadows of their past and carve a new legend into the unforgiving soil of the frontier. The true hero had emerged, not just the boy taken too soon, but the man who refused to be broken. And the fight for justice was only just beginning. The night air was thick with tension as the outlaw gang crept closer, their shadows stretching like dark fingers across the rugged earth. The ranch lay quiet under the silver light of the moon, but inside, Martha and Jacob moved with a purpose honed by years of waiting and preparation. Every creak of wood, every rustle of dry brush, was a note in the symphony of impending violence. The time for silence had passed. Jacob crouched low beside the broken fence, where he had set a line of traps, simple but deadly, designed to slow the outlaws and give them the edge they desperately needed. His fingers brushed the worn leather of his father's rifle, a family heirloom that now carried the weight of vengeance and hope. "They won't get past this place," he whispered, voice steady but cold as steel. "Not again." Martha stood near the doorway, her eyes scanning the darkness beyond the flickering firelight. She was no longer the grieving widow, but a pillar of strength, a guardian of the land and the legacy she fought to protect. Her hands were steady, clutching a shotgun that had once belonged to her husband. "We hold here," she said simply, "for the land, for Jacob, for all we've lost." The first sounds came like whispers, boots crunching over dry earth, soft voices speaking in harsh tones. The gang had arrived, led by a man with a cruel smile and eyes that gleamed with malice. They moved confidently, unaware of the traps laid before them, their arrogance a deadly mistake. Suddenly, a snare snapped taut, jerking one outlaw from the shadows. A shot rang out, echoing through the canyon like thunder. Chaos erupted. Jacob moved with a predator's grace, taking down one attacker after another, his aim true and his resolve unbreakable. Martha followed, steady and fierce, her shotgun booming against the night. Together, they fought like the land itself had risen to defend them, unyielding, relentless. Amid the gunfire and the shouts, Jacob's true skill revealed itself, not just in marksmanship, but in strategy. He anticipated every move, using the terrain and the darkness to outmaneuver the outlaws. His years of survival had sharpened his instincts, turning him into a force no one expected. The leader of the gang, seeing his men fall, charged forward with a roar, desperate to end the fight. But Jacob met him with calm fury, the rifle steady in his hands. A single shot, and the outlaw crumpled to the ground, his reign of terror broken. As dawn crept over the horizon, the battle faded into silence. The ranch, battered but standing, bore witness to the end of a long nightmare. Martha and Jacob stood side by side, their breaths heavy but victorious. The son who had returned was no longer a boy lost to the past. He was a man who had reclaimed his home and his destiny. Martha's eyes glistened with tears, not of sorrow, but of pride and relief. "You came back to us," she whispered, voice trembling. "You kept your promise." Jacob nodded, the weight of years lifting from his shoulders. "We fought for more than survival," he said softly. "We fought for justice, for the future." The sun rose higher, bathing the land in warm light, washing away the shadows of fear and loss. The ranch stood strong, a symbol of resilience and hope. And in the quiet that followed, a new chapter began, one born from the long wait, the foggy morning arrival the emergence of a true hero, and the final showdown that proves some legends are forged in fire and never forgotten.